So in this course, we have learned lots of different things: option pricing, investments, risk management, hedge fund strategies, you name it. But I remind you something I told you when we started the course. I wanted this course to be useful, valuable, but useful. My objective is to get you prepared to get a job. And everything we have done would not be enough without what I'm going to do today, which is to cross the chasm which is between what you learn and your ability to succeed, which is very often misunderstood. I'm sure it's happened to you that you've been to a job interview, you think you've done everything right, and then you don't get the job. I'm sure it's even happened to you that you go do an exam and then you think you've done great and it didn't work somehow, right? To do that, or today my job is to explain you why. And I'm going to start with bad news. There is a paper, very famous paper by Mehrabian and Wiener, which is, it's been around for a long, long time. This paper is often misquoted, and in fact, I'm going to misquote it too. The paper is this is not a lecture on psychology, by the way, okay? It's just a lecture on practical mathematical finance to get you. So I will be abusing the contents of this paper to tell you the following, which is some of the statement in that paper. I'm going to abuse it, I told you, to tell you that in an act of communication, like a job interview, the success of it is going to be to a 15% rate due to the contents of it, and to a 85% is going to be about everything else. And I say this is bad news because I think in your years, many of you are about to graduate at U of T, and I think in these years that you've been at U of T, you have spent 100% of your time on the 15% that matters. Today, I'm going to spend 100% of my time on the 85% that matters. Most of you come from a mathematics background, so I know I have a very uphill battle for me, because you're not going to believe much of what I'm going to tell you. But I hope I will be able to convince you, or at least to raise some awareness on your part about what that everything else is. I'll give you a bit of background. I've been very, very lucky many times in my life. And one of the things that I consider to be most lucky for me is I had the luck of running an investment company for about 20 years. I learned lots of things about investments. I learned lots of things about finance, and as a professor, to be there dealing with the real world was fantastic for me. But also I learned something else. My company was a very good, we managed a lot of money. And my company was a very good client of a very big bank, Credit Suisse. Credit Suisse put together a fantastic event every year. In Palm Beach, they invited their best clients to go, so I was invited to go. And one of the things that they did is the person who's essentially the coach, the CEO, was there giving a course on communications, and I knew nothing about this. So I went and I took the course. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. I discovered a new passion for myself. And over time, I've learned that many of my students could use it too. So this is how this course developed. It did not develop because I studied psychology. It developed because I was in the business world, and a lot of these things are very important there. So I'm going to be here. You can consider yourself, if I am the academic son of the coach, the CEO of Credit Suisse, you can consider yourselves to be the grandsons and granddaughters of him, okay? So I want to pass on that tremendous privilege to you. And again, I know I already warned you, many of you will probably not believe me, but I think by 1 p.m. I expect to have convinced at least 80% of you. That's my objective. The rest of you will be convinced maybe in the next 4 or 5 years. Okay? Maybe too late. Hopefully not. Okay. So I want to start, I'm going to play a lot of videos today because it is a good way for me to summarize what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with this one. It's a video which is, we're going to do better than this video, okay? But this video is a favorite of many people in marketing.
What did you do to my sign?
I wrote the same, but in different words.
Thanks, love.
So I'm going to start with a bit of philosophy. Ludwig Wittgenstein is considered to be the philosopher of communication in the 20th century. I don't know if you know about him. Wittgenstein, anybody knew about Wittgenstein? Yes, you knew? Yes, no? Okay, so he would have been very good on Twitter, on X. He's very well known for his aphorisms, and I just want to go through them. One is, it says, communication is effective only when it breeds understanding. And I think you would be very much in favor of that. Because I assume you've been to many lectures where, yeah, he's smiling, I think you know what I'm talking about, where it's quite obvious that the purpose of the instructor is to explain it to themselves, right? Yeah. And so you can tell me that this didn't work, right? Yeah, so in an act of communication, it's very important to be very aware of that. It's a very common disease. It's an epidemic, in fact. So he said that, and I would probably agree with that. You probably agree with that. This is perhaps the most important one. Communicating to others is all about the others. And this is something which is very, very important. When you're applying for a job, for example, it's a very common mistake to just think about yourself. You go there, and some students even called me the night before and asked me what they should study for the job interview. It's really not about you. It may look like it's about you. As you will see today, it's not about you, it's about the others. So that's not the right approach to that. And he said something which I actually don't agree with that. We're going to prove today this is not true. But he said it. He said, if you can't express what you mean, you never really did know it in the first place. This is not true. It's not true because today we're gonna dig very deep into the question of meaning and the question of knowledge. Okay, but he said that. So he's there, Wittgenstein. When it comes to presentation skills, and here I'm talking about it, I'm going to use the job interview as the objective, but there's many other things. It could be when you are getting a job, you present to your team, you present to your boss. When you're, at home talking to your roommate, your partner, your children. It's always an act of communication. And the act of communication contains one very important element, which is the verbal skills. This is everything you can express with words. And in that commercial, we saw that. The choice of words matters. But it's not just that. It's many other things. And I would like to tell you that it's absolutely essential that you need to have solid communication and presentation skills. And this doesn't matter who you are. You could be applying for a job, but you could be a dentist, you could be anything. This applies to everybody. And the reason is, the key to our success is the communication with others, back to Wittgenstein. It's a mistake to think that the communication that matters is the communication to your computer. Communicating to computers or even to animals is very different from communication to humans. And that is what I want to be doing here today. I want to stress how that is important for you and the act of that. So I'll start with some comments. These are the very well-known things that some of you may already know. When you make a presentation, the advice that we're often given is to treat presentations as storytelling. We all like to be told stories. Stories is a very efficient way of communicating. You have a timeline. The timeline gives the listener a handle to hold on to what you're saying. And in fact, when I come to this, I would like to talk about, anybody here likes to watch movies? You watch movies? Yes? Okay. So when you watch a movie, you're being presented something, you're completely passive. Okay? Someone else is active, you're just listening. What is the objective of a movie? What's the objective of a movie? When people make movies, companies make movies, what? Speak very loud, I cannot. Okay, no, that is not their objective. Their objective is not to tell a story. That's a result. It's always a result. That's not their objective.
Entertain you?
No, that sometimes they actually don't.
It could be an idea to the audience.
No, the objective is that you watch it. May sound very silly, but that's what they want. Everything in the movie is engineered to get you to watch it, hopefully to the end. And then once you watch it, then everything you said gets unlocked. You can be entertained, you can make money, but the objective is that you watch it. So when you give a presentation, the objective is that people listen to it. You cannot take it for granted that they will listen to you. I don't take for granted that you are listening to me. In fact, every time I teach, I know that I have to gain your attention. So that's one thing you have to be very well aware of. No one will give you anything for free. But there's one thing that people will give you for free. The first second. The first second is yours. Everybody listens to your first second. In the second second, they are thinking what they want for dinner. But the first second is yours. So that's why you need to be very strategic when it comes to making presentations. And anybody here has done drama or even acted on it? You've done drama? Yes, you have to. So everything you know is very, very useful for that. People who, or even musicians, anybody that I've done music. Yeah, okay. So I've given a lot of concerts, and I've learned a lot of things giving concerts, which then are useful when you do this, because you have to gain the audience, and to do that, you need to understand how a presentation works. A presentation starts with the beginning. The beginning looks, this is very silly, it looks very silly, but it's very important to be aware of this. Many people, for example, they engineer the presentation so that in minute 7, you say something like, that's my presentation. What I tell you in minute 7 is my big discovery, is why I need a raise or why I need a promotion. By minute 7, the audience may not be there with you. They are physically with you in the room, but they're not there. Okay? Or if you're doing a job interview, your killer sentence, whatever that is, I don't want to get too too fast into the job interview, the audience may not be there for you. So you need to understand that. You need to, and that's why movies are done like that. So I have a lot of assignments to give you today. One assignment I have for you today is that you watch a movie. Critically, with everything you will learn today, watch the movie, but not passively. Don't just see what's there. Don't be subject to what the movie is trying to do with you. Imagine you are the director or the producer. See how they are engineering the movie to get your attention. For example, I don't know if you've looked at movies critically. What's the longest sequence you have in a movie typically? You know what a sequence is? Something happening without a breakpoint. For example, in my lecture, when you watch the videos, except for the breaks, my sequence is like 3 hours, right? Very bad movie, very bad movie. But that's the way we are asked to teach. I cannot break it. But when in a movie, anybody has a guess? A few seconds. Watch the movie. When you watch the movie, you will see that every few seconds, they change it. Right? And this goes to the psychology of humans. That's why TikTok has been so successful, and everybody's following them. Because brevity is important, and it's very hard for us to hold on to something for more than a few seconds. Okay? So all these things are relevant for like everything. A job interview, you talk forever, trying to prove how smart you are. Well, it's a bad idea. You have a few seconds. After a few seconds, they're not going to listen to you. You can be sure of that. Okay? So I'm just making you aware of these things. And when you do that, the most important part is the beginning. I'm going to use Winston Churchill today as an example of a great speaker, a bad prime minister. Don't draw that conclusion, okay? I'm not talking about him as a politician, but as a communicator, he was fantastic. Maybe that's why he got away with so many things that he got away with. So once he was asked why he never started his presentation saying, "It's a great pleasure for me to be here." And his answer is very witty, and I'll talk about this in a minute. He said, "There are only a few things from which I derive great pleasure, and speaking is not one of them." You have to engineer the first second of your presentation. I always try to do that, and it's usually about age. Oh, my name is such and such. Say something else, because the first second is the only second you're guaranteed that they will listen to you. What you would say, don't worry, we're going to go through that today. I have still 2.5 hours, but be very well aware of that. Then after the start, the next most important part is the end, because that's what they will remember. They will not remember the first second. The first second is just there to engage, to make sure that they listen to you. Is the end. The end is what people remember. So you have to plan for the end too. When you're making a presentation for a product, to be promoted for a raise, the end is what they will remember. The first is what you're guaranteed they will listen to you. The end is what they will remember. And very likely what they will use to hire you or not. And then everything else is in the middle. So to the extent you can, to the extent you are in control of, for example, a job interview, take that into account. If you're making a presentation, then you are in control, then that's how you start. Okay, so from here, I'm going to give you some presentation recipes. These are recipes that cheap MBAs give you. I'm still going to go through them. And not because I want you to learn anything from it, because I want to use them as a test case. Because we're aiming to something else. We're beginning to climb our first communication hill now, okay? At the end of the climbing, we will actually be able to watch a pretty nice landscape. This is just part of my walk. I don't know where I got this, maybe from the MBA for Dummies book or something. I have no idea. But they say it's the 666 rule. People like simplicity, so I say 666. So it must be right? So 6 words per bullet, 6 bullets per slide, 6 word slides in a row. So no more than that. That's the limit. You have been victims of presentations which are very overpowering with a lot of things on the screen, right? Yeah, and I'm sure that your reaction to that was generally negative. Maybe on occasion say, well, that's wonderful, but generally negative, right? Yes, okay, so don't do that. It's a little bit sad that you've been somehow trained at universities where we try to do what's worst for communications, which is like to overburden you with information and this and that. It doesn't work. You know it doesn't work. So please learn from your negative experiences at University of Toronto to never do that again. Okay? Yes. You're not wrong. You're not weird when these things don't work on you. They don't work on you, they don't work on anybody. So just don't learn from that. Okay? In fact, use your negative experiences as a way to learn. There's also another rule, is the 10, 20, 30 rule. It says no more than 10 slides, no more than 20 minutes, no less than 30-point font size. And you know where that's aiming at. In fact, I break that every day because I have to teach for 3 hours. So I don't believe in rules, but these are the presentation recipes. And what do these things point to? What do you think they point to? They point to something which is very important, and this I want to tell you. They point to some sort of minimalism. And here I want to tell you about, do you know the TD Center downtown? Have you been there? It's a great building. It's one of the best buildings in Toronto. It was designed by Mies van der Rohe, an architect who was one of the architects of minimalism. Anybody likes architecture here? Well, architecture has an objective, which is what? Why would a company like TD like to have a very good, very nice building there? To prove to the world that they are very smart or something? Why? So people don't like to go home, right? What? Yes, that's why companies like to have nice buildings, so people don't go home. They like to stay in the office. No? If you're the CEO of a company and you want to have a, what? You would want that, right? Or no? No, you want people to work from home. You don't want to see your employees ever, right? Okay, so maybe I'm exaggerating. I'm going to exaggerate a lot today because I only have 3 hours to make a point, all right? But let's say that that's what it was. So this is the architect. He didn't coin the sentence, less is more. It was before him, but he used it a lot. You may have heard that sentence also, less is more. So let me tell you that in this context, I want to talk about perfection. A presentation achieves perfection not when there's nothing else to add, but when there's nothing that you can take away. This is a very important perspective. I'm sure you have been also led to believe that a presentation is perfect when everything is there. No, it's perfect when there's nothing you can take away. You take something away from that and then you have diminishment. I can take this to teach in a class. A perfect class is not one in which there's nothing else I can add to it. No. Perfect class is when there's nothing I can remove. I remove it and then it's worse. So this different perspective on communication is very important. It will make your efforts to have maximum impact. And there is some consequences from this, some very, very immediate consequences. Like, for example, the elimination of verbal graffiti. Verbal graffiti is all these things, all these sounds that we use when we speak. that add nothing to the conversation. You know what I'm talking about. Some of them add nothing, like, I mean. And others actually take things away from it, like to tell you the truth. Why would you say that? Why would you say honestly? The rest of the conversation is not honest? So we've been led to act in a certain way. We've been led to avoid what sometimes is very valuable, which is the silence in an act of communication. And then people have been trained to fill it with things which add nothing. Therefore, they subtract from your act of communication, and sometimes they actually add negative elements, negative undertones to your conversation, like to tell you the truth. So I want to give you some advice. The advice is, you're going to, again, second piece of homework for today. First, you're going to watch a movie, okay? And the other is, you should record yourself. When you record yourselves, try to, again, look at it after you record yourselves. Look at yourselves in a critical way. I have here another video. It's a bit long and it's good. All these videos, by the way, are on my YouTube channel in a certain playlist, communication skills or something like that. But I want to make a reference to this. This is Richard Green. He's talking about great speakers. But beyond that, listen to him, the way he speaks himself.
It's 1903, and this extraordinary guy named Teddy Roosevelt is standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. And at that time, people wanted to create hotels and spas and turn the Grand Canyon in 1903 into a profit-making Disneyland of the environment. And he stood and said no. And he created a tipping point for the environmental movement and for the world. He said, leave it as it is. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it. Fast forward, his fifth cousin, President Franklin Roosevelt, 30 years later, 1933, in the midst of a huge crisis, the Great Depression of America, said a few words to create a tipping point towards healing for the United States.
First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
The world would have been a different place without those words at that time from that man. So, in my 30 years of studying public speaking and great speeches, I've found that there are 7 secrets that great speakers do that other people don't. And it's my belief that every single human being can be a great speaker, and that their words can create a tipping point, and that their words and their essence can change the world. The first secret is about words, and understanding that words can be the best, the most amazing in the world, but they only actually touch people and communicate 7% of the impact that one human being has on another. Voice tone, the variation in your voice, the enthusiasm, the love, the passion that comes through your voice, 38%. In your body language, are you looking into someone's eyes, or are you looking over their head and not connected? So words, voice tone, and body language, those are the 3 vehicles, the 3 pathways that great communication happens in. Secret number 4, what most people do is they throw so much data out, trying to prove that they're smart, trying to get all the content out. Words are the 7%. What is important is, what is that one thing that you want to leave people with? What is that headline? That's what makes a great speech, and that's what we're talking about today. Secret number 5 is fascinating. If you are afraid, are any of you afraid of public speaking? 41% of the world across cultures is terrified, almost to the point, and often to the point, of actually turning down speaking appointments, whether they're political leaders or business leaders or charitable leaders. They turn down opportunities to shake the world because they're scared. There are a lot of reasons why people are scared, but in my experience, the number one reason is that we don't know what public speaking really is. We don't know the true definition. The true definition of public speaking is that public speaking is nothing more than having a conversation from your heart about something that you are authentically passionate about. When I first met Princess Diana, she looks me in the eyes and says, "You know, I'm so scared of public speaking, and I wish that I could do what Charles does." Now, this was when they were actually breaking up, so it was even more difficult for her to admit that. And I said, "What does he do?" He said, "Well, he just stands up there and he tells this funny joke, and then he moves on, and he's completely unfazed by it." And I told her that Prince Charles doesn't have what she has, and what she had was what touched and moved the world. People connected with her on a human level, and that all you need to do, Your Royal Highness, is just share from your heart, that huge heart that you have, and your gut, and people will love you. Even through the speech that scares you, they will feel you, they will know you, they will connect with you, and that it is far more effective than giving a speech, than telling a funny joke, but not sharing your heart. So secret number 6, and you'll notice this in some of the speakers, is that we actually have 5 parts of our brain. Those 5 different senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and feeling, translate into 4 different actual communication languages. Speak one of them, you're not going to be very good. Speak 2 of them, you'll be average no matter who you are. Speak all 4, no matter who you are. You're going to rock the world, because you're going to be giving every person in the audience something that they can connect to. And visual is the energy of energy. It's the language of energy. It's Robin Williams. I've used him as an example, and I'm going to continue to use him as an example. How amazing was Robin Williams? Auditory is the ability to translate details and what you see, what you think, what you feel into a story, into words. Ronald Reagan was a great example of that. Auditory digital, that's the Albert Einstein, the Bill Gates, the analytical, statistically driven kind of information. You don't have that, you don't have a foundation of credibility. People are going to go, wow, that person's very charming, but there's no there. And kinesthetic is the James Earl Jones, the Morgan Freeman, the Barry White. Oh, baby.
So I want to now talk about some books which I recommend to you on these topics. This one is one of my favorites, Speak Like Churchill, Stand Like Lincoln. The book uses Churchill and Lincoln as examples of Churchill is for verbal skills and Lincoln is for non-verbals, which I will talk about later. Let me just go and there's something very interesting about Winston Churchill. When he became minister, I think, when he started to give public speeches, he directed his speechwriters to write his speeches with line breaks that correspond to the natural breaks that you should have when you speak. For example, he said that never was so much owed by so many to so few. He's talking about the fallout of World War II. So he would have probably asked his speechwriters to write that sentence like that. Can you tell the difference? You can say this sentence in many different ways. And how you say it will have completely different impact on your audience, sometimes even completely different meaning. There's another video I like very much. It's not here. I have too many videos, but there's a video by Tom Hanks, the actor. You know Tom Hanks, the actor? He was invited to give a speech in some university. I forgot it was a graduation, commencement, something. And he spent 20 minutes with one sentence in which he said the same sentence in many different ways and it conveys completely different meaning. This is what actors do. They're able to say the same thing over and over in different ways and the meaning is completely different. You need to be good at that. I cannot give you any tips. I cannot give you any, just too many combinations. Just be very well aware of that. There's only one way to get it is you have to practice. That's why today I advise, well, not today, maybe tomorrow, maybe this weekend. You have a long weekend coming up. I advise you that you have not done it, record yourself. Speaking into a camera, for example. Okay? It's a piece of homework that I give you today. And when it comes to nonverbals, I'll talk about nonverbals, but this is Abraham Lincoln. What's interesting is he was a very tall man, and he liked to wear a top hat. And what was that? Because how you look matters. How you look matters. And that's something which you have to be very, very well aware of when, for example, you go to a job interview. Of course, they say you have to dress up, and well, yeah, you dress up. It's more than that, because what you wear is part of your communication too. There's a lot of information in what you wear, so be very well aware of that. Okay. For all of you who maybe suspected that, especially maybe women, you're right. It's hugely important. But you have to engineer that also very well, because there's a big message when you do that. Good. So I'm going to summarize that book with some comments. I think you'll understand. It's all about power. And it starts with a power opener. I already told you the first second is yours, so don't waste it. You need to have a very powerful first second. Talks about the points that you have. You have to summarize information. Don't overextend what you have to present. If they ask you a question at the job interview, brevity is very important. You should do that. Talks about pause. The pause is something that you should master. It is extremely powerful. Those of you who've done acting, maybe you learned that every sentence has an important word, and actors know which one that is. And they would pause a little bit just before you say it. It adds emphasis to that. You probably know. Use it. When you're going to go to a job interview, when you're making a presentation, use that. There's infinitely many pieces of advice I can give you, but that's not my objective. My objective is to make you aware of these things. Presence. Have you noticed when sometimes someone comes into a room and then the dynamics change? That's presence. So just be aware of that. It's a great book. You should read it if you like reading. Power reading, that means read the audience. Try to understand. Always be aware. I told you it's about the others. So try to understand who is in front of you and what is happening to them. If you're at a job interview, you're interviewed, but you are interviewing them too. You have to be very well aware of what they're doing and their reaction to what you're saying. You have to engineer everything you do to them. Power wit, so that with Churchill. Power gesture, learn to use your hands, your body to make the right complement to what you say. And power close. The closing statement is what they will remember. You have to engineer that too. You have to be aware of all these things. I like to spend time, not today, but I like to spend time on the Gettysburg Address, which is one of the most famous speeches ever given by anybody, and that was Abraham Lincoln. He was not the speaker that day. We forgot who the speaker was. He was just introducing the speaker. And in doing that, he gave some of the best speeches of all time. It's here. I've highlighted for you some of the literary elements that he used for that. So if you like literature, if you like reading, if you even like poetry, All of those skills are very, very important when you create presentations, when you talk to people, even when you go to job interviews. What words you use matter. How you use them matter. So here you can see alliterations, here you can see metaphors, and that made this very short speech one of the best of all time. If you like this and want to do an exercise, I recommend that you rewrite the speech the way Churchill would have done it, or the way Churchill would have liked to have it done for him. Understand what I mean? And that's how you learn how to speak, how to present what you do. I have some very important comments now for you, those of you mathematicians, which is when you give technical presentations, it's extremely hard. Everything I've said so far applies to anybody. But if you're a mathematician and say, I have to now present a formula. Well, if you have to do that, a few things that you have to be aware of. There's a theorem in the publishing business, which is every equation cuts the audience by a half when you have it in a book. And why is that? Equations are remarkably difficult. I know you love them, you've been trained to be very good at them, but people find them very, very hard. Even people who are mathematicians themselves, if they've been in industry for a while, an equation is a very uphill battle for them. Be aware of that. So you have to always explain everything in the equation. If you have to use an equation, for example, you just came out with a new theory at work and you have to explain it to your team, a very common mistake is you just assume that every variable notation that you use, everybody knows what it is. S is stock price. No, people will have no idea what you're talking about. Don't make those assumptions. In fact, try to explain where the equation is coming from, where it's going. Give the context for the equation itself. I like to give you a rule of thumb when you have an equation, which is every variable takes 1 minute. E equals mc squared. That'll take 3 minutes to explain. You have to explain what E stands for, what M stands for, what C stands for. You're not even, I'm not saying that you can explain the theory of relativity in 3 minutes. That's not what I'm saying. You can explain that equation in 3 minutes. Be very generous to the audience when it comes to that. So the assignment I want to give you for this first part of the lecture today is to record yourself. I suggest you do job interviews with your friends. So this is an algorithm, okay? If you're friends with someone and you just maybe get some takeout, some pizza, Uber Eats or whatever, or you cook, it doesn't matter, okay? But then interview each other. To be good at something, Malcolm Gladwell says you have to spend 10,000 hours doing that. So you want to be in the situation where you go to your important job interview, you've been interviewed 10,000 hours. Then you'll be very good at it. So you better start soon and do a lot of practice. But also, it's very important that you interview someone else. Have you ever interviewed someone to hire them? You have. Okay, good. It's very important that you're on the receiving end, because it's very often one of the typical mistakes of people who go to job interviews is they don't understand what's on the other side. And by being there, you understand that being on the other side, you're very uncomfortable. Sometimes you don't know what to do, what to say. Sometimes you don't understand what you're telling them and they won't tell you. So it's very important to switch sides. And by interviewing each other, you get to, on the one hand, practice, and on the other hand, get to see how it looks from the other side. And to the person that you're interviewing, do them a favor. Highlight their verbal graffiti. When you're being interviewed, try to use pauses in a very strategic way. and spend 10,000 hours doing that. After 10,000 hours, you will be very good. Everything I'm doing here today is to help you get to that. Okay, also when you're doing this with a friend, it's very hard to do, but you have to read the audience. You have to understand the person in front of you, how they are reacting to what you're saying. And don't go fast. Remember what I told you. A perfect presentation is when there's nothing that can be taken away. So if you think you have to go fast to get to the end of what you want to say, practice that, because very likely you don't need a lot of what you were planning to say. Okay, I'm going to now, so this is the first hour. We're gonna take a break. After the break, I'm gonna move into non-verbal skills, which is where the magic happens. This is the most important part of an act of communication. So we're gonna do this in 10 minutes. So I finished the first third of the lecture today. I talked about verbal skills. We've gone through that. I think we learned a few things. I'm going to move into perhaps the most difficult part of today's lecture, which is the non-verbal skills. And I'll explain why it's the most difficult a little later. I'm going to start with with a video. It's a fantastic video. It's a long video, but I need you to listen to all of it. It's about 20 minutes. And the reason is that when it comes to the everything else that I mentioned earlier, most of it lies with the nonverbal part of the spectrum. My first video is shorter. It's about 2 minutes, and it's by Simon Sinek, one person who we're going to see a lot of today, and it's the analog of the first video I gave you at the beginning about the beggar, but it has a very different approach. Let's see what you think about that.
That all marketing was the same thing. No matter what you were selling, it was always the same thing, right? And good marketing talked about the buyer, and bad marketing talked about the seller. Make sense? I versus you, right? So to illustrate my point, I wanted to prove that what the homeless do and what Microsoft does is the same thing. So if you think about what the homeless do, there is advertising. They sit there with a little sign that says, I'm homeless, I'm hungry, I got 6 kids, I'm a veteran, like whatever, trying to appeal to everybody. That's called a little billboard, right? Microsoft has a billboard that says more memory, bigger screen, all the rest of it, right? More RAM, more ROM, right? And what the homeless are selling is goodwill. So if you walk past a homeless person and you put money in their cup, you feel good. If you give them nothing, you either feel nothing or feel bad. You paid for that feeling. There's an exchange of consideration. I sold you goodwill, you paid for it, you got it, right? They're selling goodwill. That's what they're doing. They're selling the feeling of goodwill. So I found a homeless person who was willing to help me, and her sign was pretty typical, and I found out that she makes between $20 and $30 a day selling goodwill, and she works an 8 to 10 hour day, right? $30 is considered a good day, right? Selling goodwill. And like I said, her sign was pretty typical. So I asked her if I could change her sign, and we did. And the sign that I gave her, she made $40 in 2 hours. The sign that I gave her said, if you only give once a month, please think of me next time. It wasn't about the seller, it was about the giver. What are the reasons people say they don't give? How do I know that they're genuine? I can't give to everyone. So I simply answered the questions. If you only give once a month, please think of me next time. I know you can't give to everybody, I'm legit. That's all, right? Now here's the point I was gonna make. She could have made $150 that day, but after she made her $40 in 2 hours, she left.
Because one of the reasons she's homeless, or we could surmise that one of the reasons she's homeless is she's decided that she needs $20 or $30 to live per day. So once she had it, she moved on. That's a narrative. It's a narrative, right? So she'll stay there because she didn't sit longer. It's a narrative. So there's a wonderful little trick you can use with your narrative, right? Just add the word yet at the end, okay? I'm not famous yet. I'm not that talented yet. I'm so bad, I'm not good at auditions. Like, I need to get better at auditioning, like I suck at auditions for now. Right? You can just add a couple of words of hope or opportunity or the potential for future or some sort of infinite component that will profoundly change your narrative.
So the reason I want you to show this video is because now when we're going to the non-verbals, we're gonna get into emotions. And I want to present this context of emotions within this framework. I have another one here. This is one of the ads that Steve Jobs commissioned when he returned to Apple after he was fired from Apple. And there's something interesting about this video, which goes back to what we're saying. If you look at the verbals have absolutely nothing to do with the computer company. It's the non-verbals which are at play here. And it's considered to be one of the best ads of all time. Just goes.
Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits. The rebels. The troublemakers. The round pegs in the square holes. The ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
It was the type of thinking that gave rise to Apple, the company as we know it today. And again, it's not about the verbal, so it must be something else at play here, and that's what I want to get to now. This is my interpretation of the Jung psychology. It's very important to what we're talking about here is humans are determined by a pie chart that contains three very important elements to it. One is there's three components to all of us. Two are internal and one is external. One is our attraction to physical exercise, to the physical reality. And I'll explain to why that's the case a little later, in about an hour. So for example, the athlete has a lot of its motivation is by the physical world outside you. But then in the world inside yourself, there's two aspects to that determine who we are. One is our desire for truth, and the other is our desire for beauty. And again, I will get to the bottom of this in a second. So all humans were different. We all have our different pie chart. I invite you to think of your pie chart. Which one is it? By the way, it changes over time. And this is a very important component of knowledge that you want to have about the person that you're talking to. And by the way, a lot of the act of communication, if you want to activate the sensors, which are in all humans, which will react to this, is not in the words, it's in something else. So, here's the video I want you to listen to. It's Amy Cuddy. You probably know these videos, but I want to make sure that you listen to it. This is a long video. It's about 20 minutes. She's a great speaker. Lots of verbal graffiti. Is not good speaker from that perspective, but she's very engaging. I think you'll like it. And we will learn something very important at the end of that with her experiments and her consequences, okay? So, there you go.
So I want to start by offering you a free, no-tech life hack. And all it requires of you is this, that you change your posture for 2 minutes. But before I give it away, I want to ask you to right now do a little audit of your body and what you're doing with your body. So how many of you are sort of making yourselves smaller? Maybe you're hunching, crossing your legs, maybe wrapping your ankles. Sometimes we hold on to our arms like this. Sometimes we spread out. I see you. So I want you to pay attention to what you're doing right now. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes, and I'm hoping that if you sort of learn to tweak this a little bit, it could significantly change the way your life unfolds. So we're really fascinated with body language, and we're particularly interested in other people's body language. You know, we're interested in, like, you know, an awkward interaction or a smile or a contemptuous glance or maybe a very awkward wink or maybe even something like a handshake.
Here they are arriving at number 10 and look at this lucky policeman gets to shake hands with the President of the United States. Oh, and here comes the Prime Minister of it. No.
So a handshake or the lack of a handshake can have us talking for weeks and weeks and weeks, even the BBC and the New York Times. So obviously, when we think about nonverbal behavior or body language, but we call it nonverbals as social scientists, it's language. So we think about communication. When we think about communication, we think about interactions. So what is your body language communicating to me? What's mine communicating to you? And there's a lot of reason to believe that this is a valid way to look at this. So social scientists have spent a lot of time looking at the effects of our body language or other people's body language on judgments. And we make sweeping judgments and inferences from body language. And those judgments can predict really meaningful life outcomes like who we hire or promote, who we ask out on a date. For example, Nalini Ambady, a researcher at Tufts University, shows that when people watch 30-second soundless clips of real physician-patient interactions, their judgments of the physician's niceness predict whether or not that physician will be sued. So it doesn't have to do so much with whether or not that physician was incompetent, but do we like that person and how they interacted? Even more dramatic, Alex Todorov at Princeton has shown us that judgments of political candidates' faces in just 1 second predict 70% of US Senate and gubernatorial race outcomes. And even, let's go digital, emoticons used well in online negotiations can lead you to claim more value from that negotiation. If you use them poorly, bad idea, right? So when we think of nonverbals, we think of how we judge others, how they judge us, and what the outcomes are. We tend to forget, though, the other audience that's influenced by our nonverbals, and that's ourselves. We are also influenced by our nonverbals, our thoughts and our feelings and our physiology. So what nonverbals am I talking about? I'm a social psychologist. I study prejudice, and I teach at a competitive business school. So it was inevitable that I would become interested in power dynamics. I became especially interested in nonverbal expressions of power and dominance. And what are nonverbal expressions of power and dominance? Well, this is what they are. So in the animal kingdom, they are about expanding. So you make yourself big, you stretch out, you take up space, you're basically opening up. It's about opening up. And this is true across the animal kingdom. It's not just limited to primates, and humans do the same thing. So they do this both when they have power sort of chronically, and also when they're feeling powerful in the moment. And this one is especially interesting because it really shows us how universal and old these expressions of power are. This expression, which is known as pride, Jessica Tracy has studied, she shows that people who are born with sight and people who are congenitally blind do this when they win at a physical competition. So when they cross the finish line and they've won, it doesn't matter if they've never seen anyone do it, they do this. So the arms up in the V, the chin is slightly lifted. What do we do when we feel powerless? We do exactly the opposite. We close up, we wrap ourselves up, we make ourselves small. We don't want to bump into the person next to us. So again, both animals and humans do the same thing. And this is what happens when you put together high and low power. So what we tend to do when it comes to power is that we complement the other's nonverbals. So if someone's being really powerful with us, we tend to make ourselves smaller. We don't mirror them, we do the opposite of them. So I'm watching this behavior in the classroom, and what do I notice? I notice that MBA students really exhibit the full range of power nonverbals. So you have people who are like caricatures of alphas, like really coming into the room. They get right into the middle of the room before class even starts, like they really want to occupy space. When they sit down, they're sort of spread out. They raise their hands like this. You have other people who are virtually collapsing when they come in. As soon as they come in, you see it. You see it on their faces and their bodies. And they sit in their chair and they make themselves tiny, and they go like this when they raise their hand. I noticed a couple things about this. One, you're not going to be surprised. It seems to be related to gender. So women are much more likely to do this kind of thing than men. Women feel chronically less powerful than men, so this is not surprising. But the other thing I noticed is that it also seemed to be related to the extent to which the students were participating and how well they were participating. And this is really important in the MBA classroom because participation counts for half the grade. So business schools have been struggling with this gender grade gap. You get these equally qualified women and men coming in, and then you get these differences in grades, and it seems to be partly attributable to participation. So I started to wonder, okay, so you have these people coming in like this, and they're participating. Is it possible that we could get people to fake it, and would it lead them to participate more? So my main collaborator, Dana Carney, who's at Berkeley, and I really wanted to know, can you fake it till you make it? Like, can you do this just for a little while and actually experience a behavioral outcome that makes you seem more powerful? So we know that our nonverbals govern how other people think and feel about us. There's a lot of evidence, but our question really was, do our nonverbals govern how we think and feel about ourselves? There's some evidence that they do. So, for example, when we smile when we feel happy, but also when we're forced to smile by holding a pen in our teeth like this, it makes us feel happy. So it goes both ways. When it comes to power, it also goes both ways. So when you feel powerful, you're more likely to do this, but it's also possible that when you pretend to be powerful, you are more likely to actually feel powerful. So the second question really was, so we know that our minds change our bodies, but is it also true that our bodies change our minds? And when I say minds, in the case of the powerful, what am I talking about? So I'm talking about thoughts and feelings and the sort of physiological things that make up our thoughts and feelings. And in my case, that's hormones. I look at hormones. So what do the minds of the powerful versus the powerless look like? So powerful people tend to be, not surprisingly, more assertive and more confident, more optimistic. They actually feel that they're going to win even at games of chance. They also tend to be able to think more abstractly. So there are a lot of differences. They take more risks. There are a lot of differences between powerful and powerless people. Physiologically, there also are differences on two key hormones, testosterone, which is the dominance hormone, and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So what we find is that high-power alpha males in primate hierarchies have high testosterone and low cortisol. And powerful and effective leaders also have high testosterone and low cortisol. So what does that mean? When you think about power, people tended to think only about testosterone because that was about dominance. But really, power is also about how you react to stress. So do you want the high-power leader that's dominant, high on testosterone, but really stress reactive? Probably not, right? You want the person who's powerful and assertive and dominant, but not very stress reactive, the person who's laid back. So we know that in primate hierarchies, if an alpha needs to take over, if an individual needs to take over an alpha role sort of suddenly, within a few days, that individual's testosterone has gone up significantly and his cortisol has dropped significantly. So we have this evidence both that the body can shape the mind, at least at the facial level, and also that role changes can shape the mind. So what happens, okay, you take a role change, what happens if you do that at a really minimal level, like this tiny manipulation, this tiny intervention? For 2 minutes you say, I want you to stand like this, and it's going to make you feel more powerful. So this is what we did. We decided to bring people into the lab and run a little experiment. And these people adopted for 2 minutes either high power poses or low power poses. And I'm just going to show you 5 of the poses, although they took on only 2. So here's one, a couple more. This one has been dubbed the Wonder Woman by the media. Here are a couple more. So you can be standing or you can be sitting. And here are the low power poses. So you're folding up, you're making yourself small. This one is very low power. When you're touching your neck, you're really kind of protecting yourself. So this is what happens. They come in, they spit into a vial. We, for 2 minutes, say, you need to do this or this. They don't look at pictures of the poses. We don't want to prime them with the concept of power. We want them to be feeling power, right? So 2 minutes they do this. We then ask them, how powerful do you feel on a series of items? And then we give them an opportunity to gamble. And then we take another saliva sample. That's it. That's the whole experiment. So this is what we find. Risk tolerance, which is the gambling. What we find is that when you're in the high power pose condition, 86% of you will gamble. When you're in the low power pose condition, only 60%. And that's a pretty whopping significant difference. Here's what we find on testosterone. From their baseline when they come in, high power people experience about a 20% increase, and low power people experience about a 10% decrease. So again, 2 minutes and you get these changes. Here's what you get on cortisol. High power people experience about a 25% decrease, and the low power people experience about a 15% increase. So 2 minutes lead to these hormonal changes that configure your brain to basically be either assertive, confident, and comfortable, or really stress reactive, and feeling sort of shut down. And we've all had that feeling, right? So it seems that our nonverbals do govern how we think and feel about ourselves. So it's not just others, but it's also ourselves. Also, our bodies change our minds. But the next question, of course, is, can power posing for a few minutes really change your life in meaningful ways? So this is in the lab, it's this little task, it's just a couple of minutes. Where can you actually apply this, which we cared about, of course. And so we think it's really what matters, where you want to use this is evaluative situations, like social threat situations. Where are you being evaluated? Either by your friends, like for teenagers, it's at the lunchroom table. It could be, for some people, it's speaking at a school board meeting. It might be giving a pitch, or giving a talk like this, or doing a job interview. We decided that the one that most people could relate to, because most people had been through, was the job interview. So we published these findings, and the media are all over it, and they say, okay, so this is what you do when you go in for the job interview, right? So we were, of course, horrified and said, oh my God, no, that's not what we meant at all, for numerous reasons. No, don't do that. Again, this is not about you talking to other people, it's you talking to yourself. What do you do before you go into a job interview? You do this. Right? You're sitting down, you're looking at your iPhone or your Android, not trying to leave anyone out. You're looking at your notes, you're hunching up, making yourself small, when really what you should be doing maybe is this, like in the bathroom, right? Do that, find 2 minutes. So that's what we want to test, okay? So we bring people into a lab, and they do either high or low power poses again. They go through a very stressful job interview. It's 5 minutes long. They are being recorded, they're being judged also, and the judges are trained to give no nonverbal feedback. So they look like this. Like, imagine this is the person interviewing you. So for 5 minutes, nothing. And this is worse than being heckled. People hate this. It's what Marianne LaFrance calls standing in social quicksand. So this really spikes your cortisol. So this is the job interview we put them through, because we really wanted to see what happened. We then have these coders look at these tapes, 4 of them. They're blind to the hypothesis, they're blind to the conditions. They have no idea who's been posing in what pose. And they end up looking at these sets of tapes, and they say, oh, we want to hire these people all the high power posers, we don't want to hire these people. We also evaluate these people much more positively overall. But what's driving it? It's not about the content of the speech. It's about the presence that they're bringing to the speech. We also, because we rate them on all these variables related to sort of competence, like how well structured is the speech? How good is it? What are their qualifications? No effect on those things. This is what's affected, these kinds of things. People are bringing their true selves, basically. They're bringing themselves. They bring their ideas, but as themselves, with no, residue over them. So this is what's driving the effect or mediating the effect. So when I tell people about this, that our bodies change our minds and our minds can change our behavior and our behavior can change our outcomes, they say to me, it feels fake, right? So I said fake it till you make it. Like, it's not me. Like, I don't want to get there and then still feel like a fraud. I don't want to feel like an imposter. I don't want to get there only to feel like I'm not supposed to be here. And that really resonated with me because I want to tell you a little story about being an imposter and feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. When I was 19, I was in a really bad car accident. I was thrown out of a car, rolled several times. I was thrown from the car, and I woke up in a head injury rehab ward. And I had been withdrawn from college, and I learned that my IQ had dropped by 2 standard deviations, which was very traumatic. I knew my IQ because I had identified with being smart, and I had been called gifted as a child. So I'm taken out of college. I keep trying to go back. They say, you're not going to finish college. Like, just, there are other things for you to do, but that's not going to work out for you. So I really struggled with this, and I have to say, having your identity taken from you, your core identity, and for me it was being smart, having that taken from you, there's nothing that leaves you feeling more powerless than that. So I felt entirely powerless. I worked and worked and worked, and I got lucky and worked and got lucky and worked. Eventually I graduated from college. It took me 4 years longer than my peers. And I convinced someone, my angel advisor, Susan Fisk, to take me on. And so I ended up at Princeton, and I was like, I am not supposed to be here. I am an imposter. And the night before my first year talk, and the first year talk at Princeton is a 20-minute talk to 20 people. That's it. I was so afraid of being found out the next day that I called her and said, I'm quitting. She was like, you are not quitting, because I took a gamble on you and you're staying. You're going to stay, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to fake it. You're going to do every talk that you ever get asked to do. You're just going to do it and do it and do it, even if you're terrified and just paralyzed and having an out-of-body experience until you have this moment where you say, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like, I have become this. I am actually doing this. So that's what I did. 5 years in grad school. A few years, I'm at Northwestern. I moved to Harvard. I'm at Harvard. I'm not really thinking about it anymore, but for a long time I had been thinking, not supposed to be here, not supposed to be here. So at the end of my first year at Harvard, a student who had not talked in class the entire semester, who I had said, look, you got to participate or else you're going to fail, came into my office. I really didn't know her at all. And she came in totally defeated, and she said, I'm not supposed to be here. And that was the moment for me, because 2 things happened. One was that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't feel like that anymore. I don't feel that anymore, but she does, and I get that feeling. And the second was, she is supposed to be here. Like, she can fake it, she can become it. So I was like, yes, you are. You are supposed to be here, and tomorrow you're going to fake it, you're going to make yourself powerful, and, you're going to... and you're going to go into the classroom, and you are going to give the best comment ever, And she gave the best comment ever, and people turned around, they were like, oh my God, I didn't even notice her sitting there, She comes back to me months later, and I realized that she had not just faked it till she made it, she had actually faked it till she became it. So she had changed. And so I want to say to you, don't fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. It's not do it enough until you actually become it and internalize. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Tiny tweaks can lead to big changes. So this is 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Before you go into the next stressful evaluative situation, For 2 minutes, try doing this in the elevator, in a bathroom stall, at your desk behind closed doors. That's what you want to do. Configure your brain to cope the best in that situation. Get your testosterone up, get your cortisol down. Don't leave that situation feeling like, oh, I didn't show them who I am. Leave that situation feeling like, oh, I really feel like I got to say who I am and show who I am. So I want to ask you first, both to try power posing, and also I want to ask you to share the science, because this is simple. I don't have ego involved in this. Give it away, share it with people, because the people who can use it the most are the ones with no resources and no technology and no status and no power. Give it to them, because they can do it in private. They need their bodies, privacy, and 2 minutes, and it can significantly change the outcomes of their life. Thank you.
Okay. So that gives us some advice what to do when you go to a job interview. Yes? Okay. My next half of today's class is to explain to you why. Now I'm going to talk about chemistry. We're going to understand how we make decisions. I have this video here that I want to put. You have seen this video. If you have seen this video, please do nothing. Just stay quiet. If you have not seen it, please do what the video says. It's an awareness test.
How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So why does that happen? You probably have seen the video. Okay, good. Do you know why? Do you know what's going on? So that's the next thing I want to talk about. And for that, I need to do a little bit of biology. I need to slice our brain. If you slice our brain and you understand how our brain works, the brain has there's two important elements inside our brain. And by the way, this is linked to this book. It's Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman, won the Nobel Prize for Economics. So I'm giving you the biological explanation of that. The human brain contains two very important elements in it for us today. One is the part which is called the limbic brain. It's the one that we developed when we were reptiles, maybe about 2 million years ago. Yes, and we're all the same. All animals are the same, and we too. By the way, that's the only supercomputer inside our brain. It's very fast. And then we have the frontal neocortex. Only humans have it. And it's the one that we developed maybe 300,000 years ago. So in the evolutionary scale, one is very old, one is very recent. And the things that don't work at the same time. You activate one or the other. The limbic brain is usually always there. And is the one thanks to which we're alive, because a lot of its functions are designed for survival. If you see a picture of something that looks like a tiger, you don't stop to think whether that's a real tiger. You run. In fact, the body is designed so that when you sense danger, and the limbic brain detects that. In the case of the tiger, you see that picture, what you get is a sort of cortisol, the one that Amy was talking about. And cortisol has the effect. It's both a hormone and a neurotransmitter. And it has the effect that it brings nutrients to your limbs, because the limbs are critical for survival. By the way, this is the nutrients go to your limbs, and they don't go to things like your hair or your skin, which are not key for survival. This is why when you're in a permanent stress situation full of cortisol, then your hair looks terrible and your skin looks terrible too. It's not needed. That's how the body works. This is in the evolutionary scale where life thinks to that. When you're stressed at work, cortisol is all over your body, and it makes you look bad. Your skin, your hair, but your arms and legs are in full function because that is what survival is about. However, if you look at the equation, that's the only equation I have for you today. When you look at the equation and you want to understand that the limbic brain is useless, the frontal neocortex is the one that you activate to understand that. That's the one we developed maybe 300,000 years ago. And they don't work at the same time. That's why when you are obsessed with that, you avoid danger. Sorry, you cannot avoid danger because both parts of your brain don't work at the same time. That's why in the awareness test, if you're counting, you don't see the bear. And if you're not counting, you see the bear. The limbic brain is very, very effective. It's a supercomputer working at 14 watts. It's better than ChatGPT at what it does. You understand? That's the human brain. And guess what? What part of the brain makes decisions? The limbic brain. The limbic brain. The reason why what Amy Cuddy told us works is because the limbic brain is the one that makes decisions. And that is what is triggered when you have high power poses and all of that. So you can revisit all of the video of Amy Cuddy from this perspective. And you don't need to believe me, I'm going to give you chemical proof of that because we understand the chemistry of this very well. Okay, I'm going to tell you about hormones now. Hormones and neurotransmitters. By the way, that's why Donald Trump got elected. In case you're thinking, who could vote for that guy? Well, limbic brains. He's doing marketing to the limbic brain. I'm not suggesting you do what he does when you go to a job interview, but you need to be aware that a limbic brain will hire you, not a frontal neocortex. And that's very bad news for you because, again, for 4 years we've been training your frontal neocortex. The key is that you learn how to communicate to the limbic brain, which, by the way, has no capacity for language. So it's really hard. The limbic brain only understands emotions, does not understand language. So a job interview, the perfect job interview is without words. How do you do that? That's my next chapter. Understand what I'm saying? Okay, so how do we do that? I have a video, Simon Sinek. It is going to give us the practical aspect of what I told you, but he will tell himself.
3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. And this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, A marketing message from them might sound like this: we make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You ready to buy a computer from me? All I did was reverse the order of the information. People don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into 3 major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle 2 sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. Sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that there's if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the dot-com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now, you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same 3 things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same 3 things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers' team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper. And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. And no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, "That's an amazing discovery, guys. Now we'll improve upon your technology." But he didn't. He wasn't first. He didn't get rich. He didn't get famous. So he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad, but he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
Okay, so more information about how decisions are made, how you will be hired. I don't want to spend time with this, but there's an exercise I like to do when I have time, not today, which is I go through the websites of these companies and see if when you go to the website is somehow the way that you explain what you do. If you go to the website and you click on them, usually that tells you the why of each company. Why are they there? And so what I'm telling you is actually true. But I'm not going to do that today. I want to, it's 12:58. I want to get a little bit deeper into that, and I'm going to talk now about chemistry. I want to talk about the drugs we have in our body that drive behavior, which makes everything we have seen today work. And then we can draw some conclusions from that. There is, talking about the way to lead, there's three ways, coerce, motivate, and inspire. But I want to summarize that with one, it's a 1-minute video, is one example by Dov Seidman, one of my favorite authors also in this area, which has an interesting story that describes it very well. Okay?
Vegas a while back. And when we landed, the flight attendant got on the loudspeaker with humor and good energy and said, listen, we've done some research in Southwest Airlines. And it turns out that before you deplane, if you reach around and cross your seatbelts one over the other, you're going to have good luck at the tables. Now, we all started laughing the way you did, but we did it. Now, there's a federal regulation that seatbelts need to be crossed before the next plane takes off. They turn their planes around 6 minutes faster than their nearest rival. It would have taken her exactly 6 minutes to go up and down the aisles and do it herself. They're also proclaiming home on time, no frills, fun, and safe. And she authentically connected with that. And I can assure you there's no manual or rule book that says when you land in Las Vegas, tell the seatbelt joke. She's probably going to innovate, and when they land in Los Angeles, she'll swap out gambling for celebrity sightings or something like that. And she doesn't get paid extra to do that. So here's an inspired person connecting with their passengers, okay, in a way that complies with law, delivers an operational advantage, and fulfills the company promise. And there must be ways to bring this together so it becomes, your question becomes a false choice.
So that's how people get hired. And that's how you work in a company. I have here it's from his book. You probably know the wave when you watch a game, people in the stadium. How, you know the wave? Yes. You know how the wave was created? I have the story here. I don't know anything about sports, I apologize, but I read it in his book. And on October 15, 1981, there was a televised game going on. And someone, during the game, had the vision that you could do the wave. So he tried to get it done. He had the vision, and he tried, and people, but it took him 3 attempts. After 3 attempts, he got 50,000 people to do it. You do that. It's very hard to do that. You cannot tell them what to do. You cannot go and pay $20 to each person to tell them exactly what to do. You have to get people to do it for you. And that is another example of an act of communication. You tell people what you want, and in a 50,000 people stadium, without having the ability to talk to them, he got them to do it. It's giving us another example of what we're talking about. I'm going to skip this video. I want to go to, and this one too. I want to now put this in a context that will be practical for you. And I want to talk about game theory. So I'm going to use all of the things that we have seen now, that we've seen so far. I think we've learned a few things about human psychology from a practical perspective. And I want to talk about game theory. I want you to be aware there's 2 types of games out there. Okay? There's many, but there's 2 that I'm interested in. One is a finite game. A finite game is the one that you're in right now. You're a student. And a finite game is something which is a game that has fixed rules, fixed players, and an end time. So in your case, you have fixed rules, you're following them, fixed players, like it's you, right? And then there's an end. When you graduate, you're done. Yes? Okay, great. By the way, when I give my in my opening speech to my students at MMF, I tell them that MMF is not a finite game. MMF is an infinite game. And the career that you will be in is also an infinite game. Now, what's an infinite game? An infinite game is one in which there are no known rules. The rules change, the players change, and it never ends. And guess what? You have to play, the strategy is different for a finite game and for an infinite game. You would agree with that, right? So one mistake that I also see many people in your situation do when you go into your career is to not realize that the game has changed. Because now there's a very important application of this. I don't have it here, but it's, for example, the ethics and professional behavior. Ethics and professional behavior is something which is part of an infinite game, but it's actually not part of a finite game. But this dictates behavior. You're going to be out there, you're going to be talking to people. What people will think about you is not under your control, and it matters. You can't go and say, well, what you think about me is unfair. Say, well, yes, it's unfair, so what? But that's what they think. You cannot change that. So when you look at these strategies, the finite game is always played with a what in mind. And that's why when you're doing students, that is what that matters. But you go to the infinite game, is the why that matters. That's another way of looking at what we have heard here today. Okay, so this has a very important consequence, which is how I will end my lecture today. And I'm going to summarize it like this. If you can't captivate, you'll have to be cheap. From what we have learned today, what would you aim for when you go to a job interview? Let's have I want to understand your perspective. You've been very quiet today. You've asked less questions than usual. You go to a job interview,
I make sure to hype myself up before the interview and like do a PowerPoint or something to get my.
You're going to the washroom and you're going to do that.
Exactly that, yeah.
Good. All right, that's good. Anything else?
Leave a positive first impression at the time of entering that group.
Okay, let me stay with that for a minute. Okay, I'll come into you next. A positive first impression. Good. So when does the job interview start? From a communication perspective, not when you send your resume. When does a job interview start?
Just when you enter the room, or when you turn on the Zoom video. Yeah.
Well, okay, yes. If it's an electronic, if it's on Zoom, it's when you turn on your Zoom video. Yes. As soon as they see you, right? So that first second, how can you do that first second as well as possible?
Make eye contact, firm handshake, smiling.
Smiling. Let me talk about that, okay? Smile has so much content from our perspective today, right? Yes. So how often do you practice your smile? You haven't? You have to practice your smile more than your Python programming, I'm telling you. Okay? There's many types of smiles. There's the Western smile where you show your teeth. There's the Eastern smile where you don't. I leave that to you. Okay, you pick. But a smile is the first act of communication that you typically do when you go to a job interview, right? Now, how do you prepare for a job interview? Well, I'm sure you do background checks on the person that you're going to be interviewed by, right? Yes. And ideally, you would like to have some sort of a connection. So the first words that you say are going to be what? I'm making it up. It depends on the situation. But what would your first words be? Hello, how are you? I would not say that. That's the first second. You're going to waste it on something that everybody says. You're going to say your name? I would not say that. Let's say that this person is a graduate from U of T. What would you say? I would talk about U of T. No? Right? If this person is a graduate of Waterloo, what would you say? I'll find some connection that you have with Waterloo, and that's what I would say. I'm giving you ideas. It, of course, depends on many things. Yes? If he or she is Chinese and you're Chinese, what would you say? Ni hao. I don't know. But that's your opportunity to start and to make maximum impact, right? So I hope you realize how important it is. You need to go prepared with that. And how would you end the job interview?
Talking about a potential future connection. I forward something.
Could be. It's always about them. It's always about them, right? Let's say that you wanted to say something earlier, and it's your chance now. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, making them pay attention to you. So, like,
Well, they have to make sure they listen to you, right? We went through that. You are being interviewed by, I'm making this up, but Bank of Nova Scotia. How would you end? I'll make you richer than you think, or something, you know, go to their commercials. I'm giving you ideas, okay? I'm not saying that you say that. Maybe that's a very inappropriate thing to say. But I hope you understand you need to prepare the job interviews. And by the way, the job interview is not going to be how much you've learned at APM 466 or equivalent. That's what took you there, okay? So let's get a little bit deeper into that. There's a few more things that I need to bring up for what we need to accomplish in that job interview. And by the way, I think you realize by now that what I'm telling you is not only useful for a job interview, it's useful when you make a presentation of your product, when you have a sales job, you have to try to gain a client, or how you communicate with your friends or your family. Understand, right? It's all the same thing. It's all acts of communication. So let's get a little bit deeper into that. All right. So I have here some comments about it's another video about leadership and the infinite game. I told you about that. I am going to now show it to you. I don't think it's very long. If not, I'll cut it. I want someone else to tell you their view on the finite versus infinite game.
I spoke at a leadership summit for Microsoft. I also spoke at a leadership summit for Apple. Now, at the Microsoft Summit, I would say 70% of the executives, and this was under the Steve Ballmer days, I would say about 70% of the executives spent about 70% of their presentations talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple Summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with their competition, the other one was obsessed with where they're going. So at the end of my presentation at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the new Zune, which was the competitor to the iPod Touch when it was a thing, right? And I have to tell you, this piece of technology was spectacular. It was beautiful. The user interface was incredible. The design was amazing. It was intuitive. It was one of the most beautiful, elegant pieces of technology I'd ever seen, right? Now, it didn't work with iTunes, which is an entirely different problem. I couldn't use it. But that's something else. I'm sitting in the back of a taxi with a senior Apple executive, sort of employee number 12 kind of guy, and I decide to stir the pot. And I turn to him and I say, you know, I spoke at a Microsoft summit, and they gave me their new Zune, and I have to tell you, it is so much better than your iPod Touch. And he turned to me and said, I have no doubt. Conversation over. Because the infinite player isn't playing to be number one every day with every product. They're playing to outlast the competition. If I had said to Microsoft, oh, I've got the new iPod Touch, it's so much better than your new Zune, they would have said, can we see it? What does it do? We have to see it. Because one is obsessed with their competition, the other is obsessed with why they do what they do, the other is obsessed with where they're going. And the reason Apple frustrates their competition is because secretly, they're not even competing against them. They're competing against themselves. And they understand that sometimes you're a little bit ahead, and sometimes you're a little bit behind. And sometimes your product is better, and sometimes you're not. But if you wake up every single morning and compete against yourself, how do I make our products better than they were yesterday? How do I take care of our customers better than we did yesterday? How do we advance our cause more efficiently, more productively than we did yesterday? How do we find new solutions to advance our calling, our cause, our purpose, our belief, our why every single day? What you'll find is over time, you will probably be ahead more often. Those who play the infinite game understand it's not about the battle, it's about the war. And they don't play to win every day. And they frustrate their competition until their competition drops out of the game. Every single bankruptcy, almost every merger and acquisition is basically a company saying we no longer have the will or the resources to continue to play, and we have no choice to either drop out of the game or merge our resources with another player so that we can stay in the game. That's what that is. And if you think about the number of bankruptcies and mergers and acquisitions, it's kind of proof that most companies don't even know the game they're in. You want to be a great leader, start with empathy. You want to be a great leader, change your perspective and play the game you're actually playing.
To understand this a little bit better, I want to tell you about drugs now. I'm going to talk about the limbic drugs. These are substances that we create ourselves, internal drugs, not external drugs, internal drugs. And they are relevant for what I'm talking about here. Now I'm going to group them into two. There's 4 of them I want to talk about. I want to group them into 2 groups. The first is selfish drugs. These are drugs that we can create on our own. And the first is endorphins. It's a painkiller. Endorphin is a painkiller. Those of you who do exercise on a daily basis would know this. Endorphin is what the body generates when you're doing exercise. And we need it because that's how we went hunting 300,000 years ago, right? And this is what drives, and this is addictive. Those of you who do exercise know that if one day you don't do exercise, then you have that syndrome, abstinence syndrome, okay? The next one, which is also a limbic drug, is dopamine. Dopamine is where you get something done. And I like this button, it's $25 at Staples, which that was easy. That's a dopamine shot, that's what it is. You're paying $25 to get a dopamine shot into your body. And this is important because this is how we get things done, right? And these are selfish, we do them on our own. Because today we're talking about communication, they're not relevant for us. But it's important to understand that they are addictive, just like the ones I want to tell you. In the social category, these are drugs that we can only generate with others, not on your own. The first is oxytocin, which is my favorite and the one that I will spend some time talking about next. It's called the love hormone. For the longest time, it was considered to be a female drug. It is produced at childbirth, it's true. But actually, you're going to hear the person who discovered the social element of this next in his video. I want to tell you about the relevance of this, because the love hormone is addictive too. Oxytocin is something that you create, for example, when you hug someone. During COVID-19, many people had the abstinence syndrome of oxytocin because you couldn't hug people. And that's created tremendous mental problems and physical problems to population around the world. We're addicted to it. We need it. And the last one is serotonin, which you also create in the company of others. Is the happiness that arises from being in company. For example, at family gatherings, happy family gatherings, not the other ones. Understand? And it's addictive too. It's addictive too. By the way, oxytocin has a very interesting consequence, which is it is the antidote to cortisol. Oxytocin eliminates cortisol. Okay, so if these are addictive, and you go to a job interview, you want the interviewer to generate one of the four, because all four make you feel good. So for endorphins, maybe you go play golf with them. That will work, right? That's why people go play golf. You go play tennis, but then the advantage of golf is you can generate endorphins, but you actually are talking to them at the same time, right? That's chemical proof that a business golf event works. Serotonin and oxytocin are great. We will see more about that, but that's what serotonin and oxytocin, especially serotonin, is the one that justifies the business lunch. Right? Yeah. Dopamine is hard to get the other person to have when you're having a job interview, unless it's just, another job interview done, next. So oxytocin is the one that is your challenge when you go to a job interview. If you have a way of getting the other person to generate oxytocin, that will maximize the chances that you get hired. You can try to give him a hug, but maybe I don't recommend that in most cases, okay? Sometimes it's, I'll leave that to your judgment, okay? I'm not gonna get into that, but this is the next thing that I want to do. And by the way, this is chemistry. This is not a matter of opinion, okay? I'm not going to play this. I'm not gonna play that. This one, yes. So this is the guy who discovered what I'm telling you about oxytocin. We're gonna listen to him, and then we will end with all the consequences of that, okay? It's a new perspective on a job interview.
Is there anything unique about human beings? There is. We're the only creatures with fully developed moral sentiments. We're obsessed with morality as social creatures. We need to know why people are doing what they're doing. And I personally am obsessed with morality. It's all due to this woman, Sister Mary Maristella, also known as my mom. As an altar boy, I breathed in a lot of incense, and I learned to say phrases in Latin. But I also had time to think about whether my mother's top-down morality applied to everybody. I saw that people who were religious and non-religious were equally obsessed with morality. I thought maybe there was an earthly basis for moral decisions. But I wanted to go further than to say our brains make us moral. I want to know if there's a chemistry of morality. I want to know if there was a moral molecule. After 10 years of experiments, I found it. Oh, would you like to see it? I brought some with me. This little syringe contains the moral molecule. It's called oxytocin. So oxytocin is a simple and ancient molecule found only in mammals. In rodents, it was known to make mothers care for their offspring, and in some creatures, allowed for toleration of burrow mates. But in humans, it was only known to facilitate birth and breastfeeding in women, and is released by both sexes during sex. So when I had this idea that oxytocin might be the moral molecule, I did what most of us do. I tried it out on some colleagues. And one of them told me, "Paul, that is the world's stupidest idea." It is, he said, only a female molecule. Can't be that important. But I countered, well, men's brains make this too. There must be a reason why. But he was right. It was a stupid idea. But it was testably stupid. In other words, I thought I could design an experiment to see if oxytocin made people moral. Turns out it wasn't so easy. First of all, oxytocin is a shy molecule. Baseline levels are near zero without some stimulus to cause its release. And when it's produced, it has a 3-minute half-life and degrades rapidly at room temperature. So this experiment would have to cause a surge of oxytocin, have to grab it fast and keep it cold. I think I can do that. Now luckily, oxytocin is produced both in the brain and in the blood, so I could do this experiment without learning neurosurgery. Then I had to measure morality. So taking on morality with a capital M is a huge project. So I started smaller. that I'd study one single virtue: trustworthiness. Why? I had shown in the early 2000s that countries with a higher proportion of trustworthy people are more prosperous. So in these countries, more economic transactions occur and more wealth is created, alleviating poverty. So poor countries are by and large low trust countries. So if I understood the chemistry of trustworthiness, I might help alleviate poverty. But I'm also a skeptic. I don't want to just ask people, are you trustworthy? So instead I use the Jerry Maguire approach to research. If you're so virtuous, show me the money. So what we do in my lab is we tempt people with the virtue and vice by using money. Let me show you how we do that. So we recruit some people for an experiment. They'll get $10 if they agree to show up. Then we'll give them lots of instruction, and we never, ever deceive them. Then we match them in pairs by computer. And in that pair, one person gets a message saying, do you want to give up some of your $10 you earned for being here and ship it to someone else in the lab? But the trick is, you can't see them, you can't talk to them, you only do it one time. Now, whatever you give up gets tripled in the other person's account. Going to make them a lot wealthier. And they get a message by computer saying, person one sent you this amount of money. Do you want to keep it all, or do you want to send some amount back? Okay, so think about this experiment for a minute. You're going to sit in these hard chairs for an hour and a half. Some mad scientist is going to jab your arm with a needle and take 4 tubes of blood. And now you want me to give up this money and ship it to a stranger? So this was the birth of vampire economics. Make a decision, give me some blood. So in fact, experimental economists had run this task around the world and for much higher stakes. And the consensus view was that the transfer from the first person to the second was a measure of trust. And the transfer from the second person back to the first measured trustworthiness. But in fact, economists were flummoxed on why the second person would ever return any money. They assumed money is good. Why not keep it all? That's not what we found. We found 90% of the first decision makers sent money, and of those who received money, 95% returned some of it. But why? Well, by measuring oxytocin, we found that the more money the second person received, the more their brain produced oxytocin, and the more oxytocin on board, the more money they returned. So we have a biology of trustworthiness. But wait, what's wrong with this experiment? 2 things. One is that nothing in the body happens in isolation. So we measured 9 other molecules that interact with oxytocin when they didn't have any effect. But the second is that I still only had this indirect relationship between oxytocin and trustworthiness. I didn't know for sure oxytocin caused trustworthiness. So for my next experiment, I know I'd have to go into the brain and manipulate oxytocin directly. I used everything short of a drill to get oxytocin into my own brain. And I found I could do it with a nasal inhaler. So along with colleagues in Zurich, we put 200 men on oxytocin or placebo, had them do that same trust task with money. We found that those on oxytocin not only showed more trust, we could more than double the number of people who sent all their money to a stranger, all without altering mood or cognition. So oxytocin is the trust molecule, but is it the moral molecule? Using the oxytocin inhaler, we ran more studies. We showed that oxytocin infusion increases generosity in unilateral monetary transfers by 80%. We showed it increases donations to charity by 50%. I've also investigated non-pharmacologic ways to raise oxytocin. These include massage, dancing, and praying. Yes, my mom was happy about that last one. And whenever we raise oxytocin, people willingly open up their wallets and share money with strangers. But why do they do this? What does it feel like when your brain is flooded with oxytocin? To investigate this question, we ran an experiment where we had people watch a video of a father and his 4-year-old son, and the son has terminal brain cancer. After they watched the video, we had them rate their feelings and took blood before and after to measure oxytocin. The change in oxytocin predicted their feelings of empathy. So it's empathy that makes us connect to other people. It's empathy that makes us help other people. It's empathy that makes us moral. Now, this idea is not new. A then unknown philosopher named Adam Smith wrote a book in 1759 called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. In this book, Smith argued that we are moral creatures not because of a top-down reason, but for a bottom-up reason. He said, we're social creatures, so we share the emotions of others. So if I do something that hurts you, I feel that pain, so I tend to avoid that. If I do something that makes you happy, I get to share your joy, so I tend to do those things. Now, this is the same Adam Smith who 17 years later would write a little book called The Wealth of Nations, the founding document of economics. But he was in fact a moral philosopher, and he was right on why we're moral. I just found the molecule behind it. But knowing that molecule is valuable because it tells us how to turn up this behavior and what turns it off. In particular, it tells us why we see immorality. So to investigate immorality, let me bring you back now to 1980. I'm working at a gas station in the outskirts of Santa Barbara, California. If you sit in a gas station all day, you see lots of morality and morality, let me tell you. So one Sunday afternoon, a man walks into my cashier's booth with this beautiful jewelry box. Opens it up, and there's a pearl necklace inside. And he said, hey, I was in the men's room, I just found this. What do you think we should do with it? Oh, put it in lost and found. He said, oh, this is very valuable. Well, we have to find the owner for this. I said, yeah. So we're trying to decide what to do with this. The phone rings. And a man says, very excitedly, I was in your gas station a while ago and I bought this jewelry for my wife and I can't find it. I said, pearl necklace? Yeah. Hey, a guy just found it. Oh, saving my life. Here's my phone number. Tell that guy to wait half an hour. I'll be there and I'll give him a $200 reward. Great. So I tell the guy, look, relax, get yourself a fat reward, life's good. I said, I can't do it. I have this job interview in Goleta in 15 minutes and I need this job. I gotta go. Again, he asked me, what do you think we should do? I'm in high school. I have no idea. Right? So I said, I'll hold it for you. He said, you've been so nice. Let's split the reward. I'll give you the jewelry. You give me $100. And when the guy comes, right, you see it, I was conned. Right? There's a classic con called the pigeon drop. And I was the pigeon. So the way many cons work is not that the con man gets the victim to trust him, is that he shows he trusts the victim. Now we know what happens. The victim's brain releases oxytocin and you're opening up your wallet or purse and giving away the money, right? Okay. So who are these people who manipulate our oxytocin systems? We found, testing thousands of individuals, that 5% of the population don't release oxytocin on stimulus. So if you trust them, their brains don't release oxytocin. If there's money on the table, they keep it all. So there's a technical word for these people in my lab. We call them bastards. These are not people you want to have a beer with. They have many of the attributes of psychopaths. Okay? Now there are other ways this system can be inhibited. One is through improper nurturing. So we've studied sexually abused women, and about half of those don't release oxytocin on stimulus. Okay? You need enough nurturing for this system to develop properly. Also, high stress inhibits oxytocin. So we all know this. When we're really stressed out, we're not acting our best. There's another way oxytocin is inhibited, which is interesting, through the action of testosterone. So we, in experiments, have administered testosterone to men, and instead of sharing money, they become selfish. Okay? But interestingly, high testosterone males are also more likely to use their own money to punish others for being selfish. Now think about this. It means within our own biology, we have the yin and yang of morality. We have oxytocin that connects us to others, makes us feel what they feel. And we have testosterone. And men have 10 times the testosterone as women, so men do this more than women. We have testosterone that makes us want to punish people who behave immorally. We don't need God or government telling what to do. It's all inside of us. Okay? Right, so you may be wondering, oh, these are beautiful laboratory experiments. Do they really apply to real life? Yeah, I've been worrying about that too. So I've gone out of the lab to see if this really holds in our daily lives. So last summer, I attended a wedding in southern England, 200 people in this beautiful Victorian mansion. I didn't know a single person. And I drove up in my rented Vauxhall, and I took out a centrifuge and dry ice and needles and tubes, and I took blood from the bride and the groom and the wedding party and the family and the friends before and immediately after the vows. And guess what? Weddings cause the release of oxytocin, but they do so in a very particular way. Who is the center of the wedding solar system? The bride. She had the biggest increase in oxytocin. Who loves the wedding almost as much as the bride? Her mother, that's right. Her mother was number 2. Then the groom's father, then the groom, then the family, then the friends, arrayed around the bride like planets around the sun. So I think it tells us that we've designed this ritual to connect us to this new couple. Connect us emotionally. Why? Because we need them to be successful at reproducing to perpetuate the species. I also worried that my trust experiments with small amounts of money didn't really capture how often we actually trust our lives to strangers. So even though I have a fear of heights, I recently strapped myself to another human being and stepped out of an airplane at 12,000 feet. I took my blood before and after, and I had a huge spike in oxytocin. And there's so many ways we can connect to people. For example, through social media. Many people are tweeting right now. So we investigated the role of social media and found that using social media produces solid double-digit increases in oxytocin. So I ran this experiment recently for the Korean broadcasting system, and they had the reporters and their producers participate. And one of these guys, must have been 22, had a 150% spike in oxytocin. I mean, astounding. No one has this. So he was using social media in private. When I wrote my report to the Koreans, I said, look, I don't know what this guy was doing, but my guess was interacting with his mother or his girlfriend. They checked. He was interacting on his girlfriend's Facebook page. There you go. That's connection. Right? So there's tons of ways that we can connect to other people, and it seems to be universal. 2 weeks ago, I just got back from Papua New Guinea, where I went up to the highlands, very isolated tribes of subsistence farmers living as they have lived for millennia. There are 800 different languages in the highlands. These are the most primitive people in the world, and they indeed also release oxytocin. Okay, so oxytocin connects us to other people. Oxytocin makes us feel what other people feel, and it's so easy to cause people's brains to release oxytocin. I know how to do it, and my favorite way to do it is in fact the easiest. Let me show it to you. Come here, give me a hug. There you go. So my penchant for hugging other people has earned me the nickname Dr. Love. I'm happy to share a little more love in the world. It's great. But here's your prescription from Dr. Love. 8 hugs a day. We have found that people who release more oxytocin are happier. And they're happier because they have better relationships of all types. Dr. Love says 8 hugs a day. 8 hugs a day, you'll be happier and the world will be a better place. Of course, if you don't like to touch people, I can always shove this up your nose. Thank you.
So I think that gives us the ultimate piece of advice when you want to go for a job interview. You have to make them fall in love with you. That's the end of my course. Thank you very much.